Welcome to the Training for Mandated Reporters, an overview of reporting requirements for human services professionals provided by New York State Justice Center for the Protection of People with Special Needs. This training is designed for human services professionals as defined by the Protection of People with Special Needs Act. During this presentation, we will provide an overview of the Protection of People with Special Needs Act and definitions and the state oversight agencies' programs and facilities over which the Justice Center has jurisdiction. We will also cover the reporting requirements of human service professionals, as well as how to report an incident to the Vulnerable Persons Central Register, also known as the VPCR, what to report, and finally, what happens to a report. Protection of People with Special Needs Act and definitions. The Justice Center was established by the Protection of People with Special Needs Act, enacted as Chapter 501 of the Laws of 2012. The intent of the Act was to create a durable set of consistent safeguards for all vulnerable persons that will protect them against abuse, neglect, and other conduct that may jeopardize their health, safety, and welfare, and to provide fair treatment to the employees upon whom they depend. In addition to establishing the Justice Center, the Protection of People with Special Needs Act mandates that the Justice Center operate a statewide hotline referred to as the Vulnerable Persons Central Register, or the VPCR, to ensure that allegations of reportable incidents are promptly reported and fully investigated, that responsible individuals are held accountable, and that providers implement corrective action plans to prevent future incidents. Further, the Protection of People with Special Needs Act identifies certain people who are defined as mandated reporters and requires these people to report reportable incidents involving vulnerable persons to the Justice Center's Vulnerable Persons Central Register. We'll start with an overview of some important terms from this legislation. First, who is a mandated reporter? There are two types of mandated reporters. The Act defines a mandated reporter as either a human services professional or a custodian. Most importantly, mandated reporters play a critical role in eliminating abuse and neglect. Your call can make a difference in protecting an individual in your care from abuse or neglect. Human services professionals are those who may not see a service recipient on a daily basis, but who interacts with the individual during the course of providing professional services. Under the Act, human services professionals include three groups: medical or clinical professionals, education professionals, and law enforcement personnel. Medical or clinical professionals include physicians, dentists, mental health professionals, registered and licensed practical nurses, psychologists, and social workers. Other medical or clinical professionals includes persons credentialed by OASIS, licensed hospital personnel engaged in admission, examination, care, or treatment of patients, licensed speech or language pathologist or audiologist, or licensed occupational therapist. Education professionals includes school teachers, guidance counselors, school nurses, school social workers, and any other school personnel required to hold a teaching or administrative license or certificate. Finally, law enforcement personnel are also considered mandated reporters. Law enforcement personnel includes peace officers, police officers, district attorneys, or any other law enforcement official. Custodians are individuals who are employed by or volunteer at state-operated, licensed, or certified facilities or agencies under the Justice Center's jurisdiction. Consultants, volunteers, or contractors of organizations or companies that contract with facilities and agencies under the Justice Center's jurisdiction are also considered to be custodians if they have regular and substantial contact with the service recipient. A mandated reporter must report a reportable incident to the VPCR when the incident involves or is committed against a vulnerable person. What do these terms, reportable incidents and vulnerable persons, mean? There are three general types of reportable incidents: abuse, neglect, and significant incident. We'll discuss reportable incidents in more detail later in this presentation. Who is a vulnerable person? Under the Protection of People with Special Needs Act, vulnerable persons are defined as individuals who may be vulnerable to abuse and neglect because of their reliance on professional caregivers in state-operated, licensed, or certified facilities, programs, or agencies. Vulnerable persons are not necessarily individuals with disabilities, although many are. Throughout this training, we will refer to vulnerable persons as service recipients. Who are the agencies that serve vulnerable persons? Generally, facilities licensed, operated, or certified by the following state oversight agencies are within the Justice Center's jurisdiction: the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, or OPWDD, the Office of Mental Health, OMH, the Office of Addiction Services and Supports, OASIS, the Office of Children and Family Services, OCFS, the Department of Health, or DOH, and the State Education Department, SED. In the next few slides, we will provide information about each state oversight agency and a brief overview of covered programs. We will not provide a complete list of all covered programs. If you have a client or patient who you feel may have experienced abuse or neglect, but you are uncertain if they are receiving services from a covered program, we encourage you to contact the VPCR. If we do not have jurisdiction over the incident, we will pass the information on to the appropriate party.
State oversight agencies. The Office for People with Developmental Disabilities coordinates services for more than 128,000 New Yorkers with developmental disabilities, including intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorders, and other neurological impairments. The Justice Center has jurisdiction of state-operated certified residential facilities and certified non-residential OPWDD programs. Some examples include community residence, supportive community residence, individualized residential alternative, certified day habilitation, Article 16 clinics, and intermediate care facility. OPWDD funds some facilities and programs but does not certify them. These are not under Justice Center jurisdiction. Examples of funded but not certified programs include pre-vocational services, supported employment, sheltered workshops, and Medicaid service coordination. The Office of Mental Health promotes mental health with a particular focus on facilitating recovery for persons throughout the lifespan who are receiving treatment for serious mental illness. The Justice Center has jurisdiction of all state-operated psychiatric centers and programs, inpatient hospital programs, outpatient programs, and residential programs. Some examples include inpatient treatment programs, private psychiatric centers, community residence and crisis residence, residential treatment facilities for children and youth, and general hospital inpatient programs licensed by the Department of Health. Examples of programs not within the Justice Center's jurisdiction include OMH-operated programs or facilities located in state correctional facilities under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, or DOCS, and secure treatment facilities known as sex offender treatment programs located within OMH state-operated psychiatric centers. The Office of Addiction Services and Supports oversees one of the nation's largest addiction services systems with nearly 1,650 prevention, treatment, and recovery programs. The Justice Center has jurisdiction over all facilities or programs operated, licensed, or certified by OASIS. Examples include addiction treatment centers, intensive residential rehabilitation, outpatient services, supportive living services, chemical dependency treatment centers operated in collaboration with the Department of Correctional and Community Services, and community residential services. Examples of programs not within the Justice Center's jurisdiction include prevention services, recovery initiatives, drug courts, and drug treatment alternatives to prison programs. The Office of Children and Family Services is dedicated to improving the integration of services for New York's children, youth, families, and vulnerable populations to promoting their development, and to protecting them from violence, neglect, abuse, and abandonment. Relative to the Justice Center, the Office of Children and Family Services operates residential programs for youth who have been placed in the custody of the Commissioner of OCFS as a juvenile offender or juvenile delinquent. These youth live in secure, limited secure, or non-secure residential settings. OCFS also certifies or licenses residential programs operated by voluntary agencies and local social services districts. Youth housed in these facilities may not have offender or delinquent status. They may be there for foster care placement, respite care, homeless runaway youth placement, undocumented youth placement, etc. The Justice Center has jurisdiction over state-operated facilities, which includes the Division of Juvenile Justice and Opportunities for Youth, or DJ-JOY. Other examples include youth detention, residential treatment facilities, or RTFs, homeless youth and runaway programs. Programs not within the Justice Center's jurisdiction include in-state foster family homes and residential programs for victims of domestic violence. The Department of Health protects, improves, and promotes the health, productivity, and well-being of all New Yorkers. The Justice Center's jurisdiction of DOH programs is limited to certain licensed adult care facilities and regulated camps for children with developmental disabilities. The list of covered camps may vary each year depending on permitting. The number of covered adult care facilities may also vary depending on the census of individuals served with serious mental illness. Department of Health programs not covered by the Justice Center's jurisdiction include nursing homes and hospitals. The State Education Department is part of the University of the State of New York, one of the most complete, interconnected systems of educational services in the United States. Relative to the Justice Center jurisdiction, the State Education Department operates, supports, and regulates residential schools that provide education to students with disabilities. Both day and residential students who attend such schools are protected under the Protection of People with Special Needs Act. Examples include the New York State School for the Blind, the New York State School for the Deaf, state-supported schools, approved residential schools in-state and out-of-state, and special act schools. Public schools are not covered by the Justice Center's jurisdiction. Now, let's talk more specifically about a mandated reporter's reporting obligations. When is reporting required? If you have reasonable cause to suspect a reportable incident has occurred, you must report it to the VPCR immediately upon discovery. As mentioned earlier, the Justice Center has an obligation to ensure that all allegations of reportable incidents are investigated. Reportable incidents may prove to be unsubstantiated upon investigation, but it is your responsibility to report all incidents to ensure that all potential abuse and neglect and other situations are investigated. So what do we mean when we say you must report immediately? Immediately means right away. Immediate reporting may be delayed to take the necessary steps to call 911, implement safety measures to protect the service recipient from further harm, or to follow internal facility procedures. However, no internal procedure should significantly delay a report to the Justice Center. Staff going off duty does not justify a delay in reporting. A report that is delayed more than 24 hours may be considered obstruction of reports. And what does it mean to report upon discovery? Discovery means that one of two things has happened. Either you witness a suspected reportable incident, or another person, including a service recipient or family member, provides you with reasonable cause to suspect that a service recipient has been subjected to a reportable incident. Finally, what is reasonable cause? Reasonable cause to suspect generally means that based on all the evidence, facts, and circumstances known or readily available to you, it is rational to think that the service recipient was subjected to a reportable incident. If a reasonable person would have a rational or sensible suspicion that an event that qualifies as a reportable incident may have occurred, that is enough to require a report to the Justice Center. Conclusive evidence that a reportable incident occurred is not required. When deciding whether there is reasonable cause to suspect that a reportable incident occurred, you should consider your own observations, trainings, experiences, and common sense in assessing the reliability of information presented to you, as well as assessing whether the service recipient suffered an injury, and if so, whether you believe the explanation of how the injury occurred. If you are unsure whether you have a reasonable cause to suspect that a service recipient was subjected to a reportable incident, we encourage you to report the incident to the Justice Center. You could also consult with your supervisor, quality assurance staff, or other appropriate staff. Remember, however, each mandated reporter has a personal obligation to report a suspected reportable incident individually to the Justice Center. For a reportable incident to be reported to the Justice Center, you must suspect that the incident was committed by a custodian. You do not need to know who committed the incident to make a report. You just need to suspect that the incident occurred while the vulnerable person was receiving services from a facility, program, or agency that is under the jurisdiction of the Justice Center. There are some examples of significant incidents that do not require the involvement of custodians, but generally, the jurisdiction of the Justice Center is limited to the actions of custodians. We'll discuss this in more detail later in this presentation. Other important concepts regarding your obligation to report. The service recipient does not have to suffer harm for an incident to be reportable. The potential for harm must also be reported. Even if the reportable incident occurred at a different facility or program from where you are employed, once you become aware that something reportable has occurred, you are required to report the incident to the VPCR. Where multiple reports to the VPCR would be made regarding the same incident as a mandated reporter, you are not required to report the allegation to the VPCR when both of the following conditions are met. You have actual knowledge that the incident was already reported to the VPCR, and you have actual knowledge that you were named in the report as a person with knowledge of the incident. For more information on this exception, see Relief from Requirement for Multiple Reporting of Reportable Incidents guidance on the Justice Center website. To have actual knowledge, you must have direct and clear awareness that the report was made, such as witnessing, reading, or overhearing the report being made to the VPCR. Having actual knowledge also includes being told by the person who reported the incident that he or she made the report to the VPCR and that you were named in the report. If you have any doubts as to whether the report was made or whether you are named in the report, you should report the incident yourself.
Is it reportable? A 14-year-old boy who lives at an Office of Mental Health residential treatment facility spends the weekends at home with his family. He has a scheduled therapy session in your office and you discover a cigarette burn on his neck that was not there the previous week. Is it reportable? Yes, but to whom? The State Central Register of Child Abuse and Maltreatment or the VPCR? In this case, the cigarette burn could have been committed by a custodian at the residential treatment facility or by someone in his family. The State Central Register and the VPCR work hand in hand to ensure that incidents are properly reported and investigated. If you are unsure where to report, we encourage you to make a report to the Justice Center and we'll share the information with the State Central Register when appropriate. As a reminder, suspicion of child abuse and neglect of children under the age of 18 in a daycare setting, foster home, or within a family home must continue to be reported to the statewide Central Register of Child Abuse and Maltreatment by calling 1-800-635-1522. A 16-year-old girl who lives in an Office of Children and Family Services residential treatment center visits your office for a dental procedure and you observe bruises on the service recipient's neck. She tells you that yesterday a staff member placed his hands on her neck and squeezed it. Is the incident reportable to the Justice Center? Yes. You have reasonable cause to suspect that a reportable incident occurred because the service recipient reported to you that a staff member placed his hands on her neck and you observe bruises there. A 60-year-old man who resides in an office for people with developmental disabilities community residence is admitted to the hospital. During your examination, you determine that he is severely malnourished, dehydrated, and has bed sores. The service recipient cannot or will not discuss his current situation. Is the incident reportable to the Justice Center? Yes. When deciding whether there is reasonable cause to suspect that a reportable incident occurred, you should consider your own observations, training, experience, and common sense in assessing the reliability of information presented to you. Although the service recipient is not discussing his condition, he has suffered multiple injuries. Remember, conclusive evidence that the injuries were caused by a custodian is not required. Identifying the custodian is also not a requirement when making a call to the VPCR. As a mandated reporter, how to report an incident is crucial to your role. Human services professionals can call the toll-free 24-hour hotline at 1-855-373-2122. For individuals using New York Relay Service, dial 711 and give the operator the number 1-855-373-2122. There is a web form as well as a mobile app that are also available for reporting abuse and neglect. For more information about these options, visit the Incident Reporting portion of the Justice Center website. When you call the VPCR to report an incident, you will be asked a number of questions. You may not be able to answer everything, but any information you have is important. In addition to your name and contact information, the types of information you'll be asked for include the details regarding the victim, the subject, the person who is alleged to have committed abuse or neglect of a service recipient, and the witness. You will also be asked to provide the details of the incident, including the date, time, and location, and the description of the incident and how it impacted the victim. You will also be asked the state oversight agency responsible and the name and address of the specific agency, facility, and/or program. In addition, you will be asked to confirm that immediate protections are in place for the victim, which can include the separation of the service recipient and subject of the report. If applicable, you may also be asked the name, title, and contact information of others who may have the same information as you. Finally, you will be asked if there is any other information that may assist with the investigation or review of the incident. It may take a few minutes to discuss all the details of the incident. You are required to report even if you don't know all the answers to these questions. Your call may be instrumental in protecting a service recipient. So, what protections are there for mandated reporters once you place the call? As a mandated reporter, your identity is confidential and may not be publicly disclosed. You may ask that your identity not be disclosed, but it may be necessary to disclose your identity to the person investigating the reported incident in order to ensure that an incident is thoroughly investigated. The Justice Center makes every reasonable effort to protect the identity of mandated reporters, especially when a reporter is alleging that he or she is the victim of retaliation for making a report. If you make a report to the VPCR because you had reasonable cause to suspect a reportable incident has occurred, the subject of the report may not sue you if the allegation is not substantiated. Immunity will not be granted to someone found making an intentionally false report. What happens if you fail to report? A delay or failure in reporting can be a form of abuse. A mandated reporter who knowingly and willfully fails to report suspected abuse or neglect to the VPCR may be subject to termination and may be sued in civil court for monetary damages for any harm caused by the failure to make a report. In addition, any human services professional required by this law to report a case of suspected abuse or neglect who knowingly and willfully fails to do so may be prosecuted for a Class A misdemeanor. Again, if you suspect a reportable incident involving a vulnerable person has occurred, you must make a report to the VPCR immediately upon discovery. Suspecting something does not require that you have conclusive evidence that an incident occurred. A reasonable or rational suspicion, based on your observations, training, and experience, is sufficient justification to make a call to the VPCR.
What needs to be reported to the VPCR? As mentioned earlier, the Protection of People with Special Needs Act defines 3 types of incidents that must be reported: abuse, neglect, and significant incidents. We are going to provide some more information about these 3 types, but you are not required to know what type of incident has occurred in order to make a report. For more detailed information on abuse, neglect, and significant incidents, we encourage you to visit our website and talk to your supervisor or quality assurance staff. The first type of incident is abuse. The Protection of People with Special Needs Act defines these 7 categories of abusive conduct by a custodian as reportable: physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, deliberate inappropriate use of restraints, use of aversive conditioning, obstruction of reports of reportable incidents, and unlawful use or administration of a controlled substance. Broadly, abuse is an action by a custodian against a service recipient that causes or has the potential to cause injury or serious protracted impairment of the physical, mental, or emotional condition of a service recipient. Remember, the service recipient does not have to suffer harm for an incident to be reportable. The potential for harm must also be reported. Neglect is also reportable under the Protection of People with Special Needs Act. The Act defines neglect as any breach in a custodian's duty that results in or is likely to result in death, physical injury, or impairment of the physical, mental, or emotional condition of a service recipient. Most commonly, neglect is the result of a custodian's lack of attention or failure to act as required by his or her responsibilities. Neglect can include, but is not limited to, failure to provide proper supervision, failure to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, medical, dental, optometric, or surgical care, and failure to provide access to educational instruction. The final type of reportable incident is defined as significant incident. A significant incident is an incident that does not meet the definition of abuse or neglect, but one that may result in or has the potential to result in harm to the health, safety, or welfare of a person receiving services. The Justice Center does not make any determinations regarding significant incidents, but we do work with the state oversight agencies on corrective action plans that outline steps to avoid such incidents from reoccurring. The Protection of People with Special Needs Act identifies three categories of significant incidents. The first is any action on the part of a custodian that is inconsistent with practices, laws, policies, or actions that is simply inconsistent with an individual's treatment plan. The Act identifies four non-exclusive forms of conduct: unauthorized seclusion, unauthorized timeout, administration of medication inconsistent with a prescription or doctor's orders, and inappropriate use of restraints. This is a broad category and may include other inappropriate or inconsistent forms of conduct. As a mandated reporter, you should report to the Justice Center any action or incident that you believe has impacted or may impact a service recipient's health, safety, or welfare. The second type of significant incident is defined as conduct between persons receiving services that may result in or has the reasonable, foreseeable potential to harm the health, safety, or welfare of the service recipient. The Justice Center does not investigate or prosecute actions of service recipients. However, these incidents must be investigated to determine if the conduct between recipients resulted from neglect on the part of a custodian or the facility or program. Finally, state oversight agencies may define specific types of incidents or events that should be reported to the VPCR as significant incidents. The next few slides will give you an understanding of what happens when and after a report is made. What happens when an initial report is made? A trained staff takes a full report and carefully enters all details of the incident into the VPCR. All calls are recorded and an incident number is assigned at the end of each call. Did you know most of our VPCR call center representatives have worked as direct support professionals? After the call, the reportable incident is classified as abuse, neglect, or significant incident. Non-reportable calls include general inquiries or calls that are not within the jurisdiction of the Justice Center and as a result cannot be investigated by the Justice Center. Once a report is classified, a case is created and assigned to the appropriate entity for investigation. Once assigned, the investigation begins. Regardless of who is conducting the investigation, the Justice Center reviews all abuse and neglect investigations and makes the final determination about whether or not the allegation is substantiated or unsubstantiated. Once a determination is made, the Justice Center notifies the victim and his or her personal representative, the subject in the case, and the provider agency director or CEO of the outcome. For purposes of confidentiality, mandated reporters and witnesses are not notified of the outcome of the investigation. The Justice Center does not make a determination regarding significant incidents. However, a state oversight agency may request that a provider develop a corrective action plan if there is an issue of concern. In summary, the Protection of People with Special Needs Act established the Justice Center to provide protections and safeguards for vulnerable persons and identifies human services professionals as mandated reporters. The Justice Center has jurisdiction over incidents of abuse and neglect committed by custodians employed by certain facilities, programs, and agencies operated, licensed, or certified by 6 state oversight agencies. Reportable incidents must be reported to the Justice Center immediately and upon discovery. Immediately means right away. Reporting cannot be delayed because of staff going off duty. However, reporting may be delayed to prevent harm or follow internal safety procedures. Discovery occurs when either a mandated reporter witnesses a suspected reportable incident or another person, including a service recipient or family member, provides the mandated reporter with a reasonable cause to suspect that a service recipient has been subjected to a reportable incident. And what is a reasonable cause? A reasonable cause need only be a suspicion that a service recipient has experienced abuse or neglect or been placed at risk of harm. Suspecting something does not require that you have conclusive evidence that an incident occurred. A reasonable or rational suspicion based on your observations, training, and experience is sufficient justification to make a call to the VPCR. For additional resources available for mandated reporters, visit the Justice Center website at www.justicecenter.ny.gov. As a mandated reporter, the following contact information is available to report abuse or neglect. To report abuse or neglect, call 1-855-373-2122. For individuals that use TTY, call 1-855-373-2123. For information about the Justice Center, please visit our website at www.justicecenter.ny.gov.